Integrity. Integrity. What does integrity mean? What does it mean to live with integrity? I mention that because the word integrity is in that first reading from the book of Job, and it's in the Psalms, and it's also implied in the Gospel. To live with integrity. The dispute that Jesus had with the Pharisees wasn't simply about divorce and remarriage. It also had to do with integrity. It had to do with justice. It had to do with compassion. And it had to do with an alternate view of God's vision for all of us. Let me be clear. Marriage in the time of Jesus and marriage today, we're not talking about apples and apples. They were nothing alike. We get married, hopefully for love, but marriage is our choice. In Jesus' day, everyone got married. It didn't matter whether you were gay. It didn't matter whether you didn't want to get married. Everybody got married because that's what you did to survive and to have a place in the world and in your community. Everybody got married, and your partner was not someone who you chose. It would have been chosen by your family, by your mother, by your father, and by your spouse's mother and father, and would be arranged. And of course, the hope was that over time you would come to at least like your spouse. But there was really no place for romantic love. You don't see that very much in ancient literature, at least not for ordinary people. And let's also be clear. If a man divorced his wife in Jesus' time, what would that mean? Well, it would mean quite simply this. It would mean that, yes, according to the law of Moses, he could write out a little note saying, I divorce you, give it to her, and then say, pack your bags and leave. Oh, and by the way, you're not taking the children because as the head of the household, as the father, the children belong to me. So goodbye. And it's not as if the woman could go out and get a job. There were no jobs for single women in the time of Jesus. It wasn't as if she could find a little two-bedroom apartment and build a new life. There was no place for that woman anymore. She would be shunned. I mean, perhaps she might be able to go back to her father's family if they were compassionate, but the shame that she would bring along with her would be great. I mean, we see a glimpse of this, don't we, in the way Joseph tries to navigate his relationship with Mary in the Nativity, when Joseph realizes that Mary is pregnant and he is not the father. It says, because Joseph was a righteous man, because he was a man of compassion, he figured that he would put her aside quietly. He would provide for her. But there was no provision for that under the law. You didn't have to provide for your ex-wife. You could just throw her out, and that would be it. And her life would be over, and she would die a lingering death. And that's why I think Jesus got riled up. I mean, he says, because of your hardness of heart. Yes, it's perfectly legal to divorce your wife in this way. But does that make it right? Is that the compassionate thing? Is this God's vision? Truly. Is this God's vision? To just cast somebody aside and leave them in the dust. That's what it came down to. It was less a question of the rights and wrongs of divorce and remarriage. And as I said, today we're in a different world. And you can't just take one or two sentences out of the scriptures and apply them to our modern day without interpretation. You can't just say, well, this is a law forever and ever, in all times and in all places and in all circumstances. That's neither logical nor is it authentic to the meaning of the Scriptures. This whole Scripture, this whole debate and argument with the Pharisees wasn't really about divorce and remarriage. It was about compassion. It was about Jesus' vision of God's love and God's kingdom, and the Pharisees. You won't be saved by just simply obeying the law. You can obey every law and still hate your brother or sister in your heart. Well, what good has it done for you? You could have done everything seemingly right and still have all sorts of prejudices and bigotries and hateful feelings in your heart. How has that helped? Because it's really about the kingdom of God, isn't it? It is truly about the kingdom of God. And we all have a moral compass. Sometimes it's really inconvenient, isn't it? Because what I want to do is the quickest thing or the most expedient thing. But actually I know that that's not right. Deep down there's something within me and within all of us that tells us when something is not just, it's not compassionate, it's not congruent with God's dream for us. And so to live with integrity is not simply about doing the right thing, it's about doing the thing that fits. It's integrated, not only into our vision of ourselves and the world, the vision and the dream that God has for us. I hesitate even to bring it up because it is so painful. But the last 10 days in our national life have torn us apart and have been supremely painful. It has been difficult to witness it all, hasn't it? I was taught, and this is maybe a bit old school, and kind of betrays my upbringing in a foreign country. But you know, when I was a boy, we used to play cricket in the summer and rugby in the winter. And in cricket, we were always taught that if there was a dispute over some part of the game, that the last thing you did was argue with the umpire. What you did as a gentleman was you walked off the field. And if the umpire decided in your favour at some point, then you could be called back. And that wasn't simply, we were taught that wasn't simply the sign of a gentleman, but that also preserved the integrity and dignity of the game. And that's just cricket. That is just cricket. But to live with integrity and to act with integrity. And sometimes that means sacrificing one's self or sacrificing one's sense of rightness for the integrity of the whole, for the goodness of the whole, and for something which is more important than just one individual. And I hope and I pray that together as citizens and that as a nation, we can find ways to live with integrity together, to act with integrity together, to do justice together. That day will come. In Hebrews it says, and I paraphrase, we're not there yet. We don't see all things in subjection to our Lord. But what we do see is Jesus. And that is our hope. And that is our strength. And that is our vision. And what I think it means is what we do and how we do it here in this little community of faith. In a small town in Western Oregon that probably very few people think of or even know about, makes a difference. It makes a difference to us. It makes a difference to our neighbours. And I think it adds to the whole, doesn't it? To live with integrity, to be a person of integrity, and we know deep down what that is. And sometimes it does indeed require our own sacrifice. And so to finish with the words of the psalmist, because this is why we are all here. I wash my hands in innocence, O Lord, that I may go in procession round your altar, always singing a song of thanksgiving and recounting all your